Welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. On today's episode, I talk with Reagan Carey, Commissioner of the Premier Hockey Federation. We talk about her journey from college to becoming commissioner, the growth of the PHF, how the league is growing from both a fan base and business perspective, and how young female hockey players can now consider playing pro hockey as a viable career path. This was an amazing interview, so I hope you enjoy it. Before we get to today's amazing episode, I wanted to talk to you about the app part of Champs App. Did you know that there are over 30 NCAA coaches with Champs App profiles that you can connect with directly? These include coaches from every D1 conference. Champs App lets you create a free, beautiful online hockey resume to share with coaches, teams, and players. Your profile includes all the information coaches want to know to help decide if you are a player they want to keep on their recruiting radar. When you connect with coaches, they will receive automatic updates when you change your profile, add game or video, or alert them to upcoming games on your schedule. Just go to champs.app and click the sign up button to start your profile. You can check out the full list of the NCAA coaches using Champs App by clicking on the links in the show notes. I'm very excited to have on the podcast Reagan Carey, who is the Commissioner of the Premier Hockey Federation, formerly known as the National Women's Hockey League, on the podcast. Originally from Schenectady, New York, Reagan was a two-sport athlete at Colby College before entering the business side of sports with the Atlanta Thrashers and Atlanta Hawks. She then went on to work at USA Hockey as the general manager of the women's senior program for 8 years, including winning gold at the 2018 Olympics. In April of 2022, she was named commissioner of the PHF for its 8th season, which it wrapped up in March with the Toronto Six winning the Isabel Cup. Welcome to the podcast, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so congrats on your anniversary as commissioner, and hope free agency is going well. We're going to get into all about the PHF a little bit later on, but why don't we start off like we do all our guests? You telling me a little bit about your hockey history and how you were a dual sport athlete at Colby College?
Sure. Well, I have an athletic family, so we played kind of everything. I'm sure like a lot of people on your podcast, and my older brother played hockey, not dissimilar from a lot of stories of female players my age. You know, got the opportunity to get the honor of getting thrown in the net during street hockey games. So I thought it was an honor at the time. I realized like everybody else just didn't want to play goalie, and you know, I started my hockey journey as a goalie for a few years, and then eventually found my niche elsewhere. My attention span wasn't quite where it needs to be a goalie for 3 periods. So found my way out of that. But
what kind of player were you? What kind of player were you? Were you a forward? Were you a D? Were you a goal scorer? Were you, you know, I know you're quite tall, so, you know.
I was going to say my real secret weapon is my wingspan, I think. So not talent necessarily, but I was a forward, and but again, kind of, you know, as youth hockey, you play everything, and you kind of find your way. But had the opportunity to just stick with the sport. I loved it. My brother kept playing. I kept playing. We moved around a lot. So, you know, fast forward to these kind of roles, it really gave me a sense and understanding of what hockey is like in different markets at an early age, and particularly for girls. Some were great, and others were, you know, you're not quite as welcomed. But eventually, hopefully, you leave, you know, those markets with a better appreciation for hockey being for everyone. So I had a great experience, you know, just playing. And the challenges of it, you know, were also there, but I think that just demonstrates whether you love or don't love a sport, how much you're willing to do. So I continued to play in high school. I played actually high school hockey in Kentucky and Louisville.
Oh, wow.
And like I said, getting a taste of all the different markets, and made a decision. I know it's, you know, it's important to the group you're speaking to, of going to boarding school or staying in the, you know, travel hockey and where I lived. And I decided to go that path and played with the boys all the way till college, when I got the opportunity to go to Colby College, which was Division I at the time. It was very exciting to have that opportunity. Never played. I played in nationals with the Ohio Flames. So I played on the girls team in high school occasionally, so I could go to nationals, and from a scouting standpoint, but eventually got to play a full-time team in college on the women's side. And that was just a great experience. And I loved my time at Colby, and certainly gave me a lot of lifelong friends. Some of them I think you've probably talked to on the podcast already.
Yes. Before we get into a little bit more on Colby College, I'm curious how your youth hockey experience, you touched upon it a little bit earlier, specifically playing hockey with boys, shaped who you are today. Because I know there were some challenging times. Specifically, I know there's some games where things may have gotten out of hand. So, how does that shape who you are today, and where you went with your career path?
Yeah, I think, well, a number of things. It was hard at the time, but you have to have people around you. I think that's a golden lesson of those years of having people that do believe in you and knowing that every part of the journey is just a moment. And so if you have your sights set on something that, you can kind of keep showing up and bringing your best, and those are the things you can control. So that's what I did. And I had a lot of people that supported me, while there were a lot of people that perhaps, weren't ready to see a girl in a certain market play, or have a girl on a boys team, or coach a girl, and all those challenges. I faced a lot of adversity, and, some of those boys teams, being the only girl to play and then get to the front of a line at practice, and then they would end drill. Like I would never get to actually practice. Anytime I was about to go next, they would end it. So it wasn't all that fun at times, but the other part of it was the teammates were always great. I had a lot of support from a lot of people around me, and I just love the sport. So it really taught me a lot about sticking with it, showing up, controlling what I can control, bring my best, and see where it leads. And obviously, for me, continuing to show up, created a great career path for me, and something that I really enjoy and proud to be a part of. So hopefully my story can serve as a little motivator for those who might be facing some of those similar challenges. Hopefully not quite the same as it was then, but I'm sure there's still some of those out there.
Yes, and I can talk to you about it firsthand. That yes, the times have certainly changed, but every so often you still hear the boy versus girl story come up in youth hockey. So, but now let's get to Colby College. How did you end up playing two sports at Colby? Like obviously the hockey makes sense, but you also played volleyball.
Well, as mentioned, I ended up moving to Kentucky. I lived in Connecticut. I played in Darien in middle school, and then moved to Kentucky. And volleyball is a big sport there. And I, as you noted, am tall, so I got recruited to play that in the fall. They didn't have soccer, which I was more familiar with playing in the fall. So from moving around all the time, I really got comfortable adapting and adjusting to what was in these, new places, and learning and just being part of a team was important to me. So had the opportunity to learn a lot more about volleyball there. And I wasn't planning on playing in college, but after meeting with the coach, and hockey was certainly my priority, but they were able to allow me the kind of small overlap of the two seasons, and let me play. And it was a great experience, and still in touch with a lot of those teammates as well, and just really, helped just enhance my whole college career.
Yeah, it's amazing how many guests that I've had on this program who were dual sport athletes. So it's actually kind of interesting. So now, what made you choose to go into professional sports for your career following your college days?
Well, I didn't really have a plan for that. I wanted to be a lawyer, perhaps a sports agent was the closest I had gotten to really mapping that out for myself. And I applied to law school, and I ended up getting an opportunity probably, I think, my junior year in college. My parents moved to Atlanta. Atlanta was just starting an NHL team there. And my mom has been a big champion of putting me in these places where maybe women or girls aren't necessarily the norm. So she really encouraged me to send them a note about how they should have more females on the staff, and make sure that they're growing the sport for everybody in this new market. So I did that, and I got a call from that team to help with some of their fan development efforts in the summer. And that opened the door to expose me to what the world of professional sports is, from the business side and kind of the front office side. And that's something I hadn't thought about or known about. It's quite different than today, where all those programs exist, and just there's a lot more transparency about that. So when I had that opportunity, I got really excited about it. I loved what I was doing, and ended up deferring the law school plans for a year to take an internship to do that with. It was a great fit at the time. It was with the Atlanta Hawks, Atlanta Thrashers, and the Atlanta Braves. So you got exposed to all these different entities at one time in 1 year, and from that point on, that's where I wanted to be, and continue to stay there.
Yeah, and it's a shame that Atlanta no longer has a team. It's a great market, just didn't have the right ownership.
I will put a plug in for Anson Carter's doing a lot of great work to see what he can do there in Atlanta. So maybe third time's a charm.
Exactly, exactly. I actually used to have an Atlanta Flames jersey when I was a kid, so before they moved to Calgary.
Yeah.
And my wife is from Winnipeg, so she actually appreciates the fact that, Atlanta no longer
Okay.
has a team. But
You're
I do
welcome.
think it would be a great market, like you say. So let's move on. How did you end up at USA Hockey?
Well, I stayed in Atlanta, worked primarily for the Atlanta Thrashers, but also the Hawks for about almost 10 years, and worked in fan development, hockey development, marketing. Just really was able to benefit from a lot of great mentors and people that believed in me and gave me opportunities. And from there, Don Waddell was general manager of the Atlanta Thrashers, and he was
Now the Carolina Hurricanes. He's now the
correct.
GM at the
Yeah,
Carolina Hurricanes. Sorry, go
and
ahead.
he did a lot of work with USA Hockey at the time. And so it wasn't on my radar. It wasn't something I was pursuing, but at some point he asked me if that would be something I was interested in, and we talked a little bit about it. And when the opportunity came to interview, that's something I was interested in learning more about. I certainly the national team and the Olympics was a big part of the inspiration for me playing hockey. And my grandfather's a two-time Olympian in cross-country skiing, so I'm well versed in how just how uniquely special the Olympic Games can be. So for when that opportunity came to interview, that was a no-brainer for me to look into it. But I was loving what I was doing in Atlanta, so it was a little bit of a difficult decision when I had to make it, but I'm glad I did, and it was terrific.
So I can literally have an entire other podcast just about your time at USA Hockey. I've interviewed many of the players that you were the general manager for, and they've told their story of making the team and not making the team. And so the one question I couldn't ask any of them, because you're the only person that probably could give the best answers. Many of the players talked about the challenge of and the stress of making the team or not making the team. So what differentiates who you pick as the last one or two players to make the team versus the last one or two who didn't make the team? I know that's a tough question, but I'm just curious, like, how do you decide on where to draw the line? Is it like by position, like you have different roles to fill, or is it just purely based on skill and attitude?
I mean, everything matters. I think you have to be clear about what does matter at that moment. Things evolve, and certainly positionally that aspect comes in. But then you're trying to build the best team, right? So it's not always the best skill. It's not always the best performer in the sense of individual accomplishment. It really is how does that person really enhance a team, whether that is with their skill, performance, attitude, just reliability. And so it's, those days when you're making teams and announcing rosters, they're the most excruciating and the best, and for the ones that make it. But you spend so much time with these players, how much they put into it. So even the ones that aren't making the roster, it has sheds no light on just how much they put into it, how much work they put in, and how much it means to them. So, at the end of the day, there's a number of spots on that roster, and you're trying to, accomplish something as a team. And so, all those things come into play. Leadership comes into play. Selflessness comes into play quite a bit, and just the ability to adapt and adjust and understand that, a team is a live, moving entity, and the goals are the same, but figure out how to get there and who's going to be the one to lean on in particular moments. All of that's always evolving. So a really challenging part of the job for sure. And so many incredible players. We tried to, really showcase as much as we could that our team reflected everybody that was, at the camps. Our team reflected everybody that did make the team better by the ones that came to compete hard and push the level of the program. So as much as you end up with, the rostered players, you wish you could have the names of everybody else, of those top 40, top 50 players that really helped us get there on the back of those jerseys when we're competing.
Gotcha. And I know, like, mental performance coaches and getting involved in the mental side of things was also a really key piece of it. Like I said, I can go on for another hour just on the USA Hockey stuff, but I'm gonna move on to some other topics. So
I'll have to comment just quickly though on the mental skills, because I think if you ask the majority of our team, they would certainly reference how important that was. And we put a ton of time. We spent almost at times equal amounts off the ice as we did on the ice. And it was largely dedicated to that mental skills development. And thanks to our mental skills coach, Dr. Colleen Hacker, who did a ton of work as well with women's soccer. And we were just lucky to have her share and enlighten our program to be able to get to the next level.
Perfect, perfect. So, all right, we need to transition, get into the PHF. So how did you end up being getting asked to be the PHF commissioner? How did that all come about?
Well, as you're probably finding out, the women's hockey world is somewhat of a small ecosystem. And I certainly, my time at USA Hockey, we've seen the development of the pro game and CWHL and NWHL. And, I think there was this point where there was an opportunity. I find that I have a particular skill set, a particular interest, and perhaps that was, the time for me to step in and try and help continue to elevate the game in the professional side of the sport. I think, as you've already noted, my background is somewhat uniquely packaged for a moment like this in our sport. So being able to contribute and serve the sport that I've gotten so much from when that opportunity came about, I was certainly interested in it, but it always comes down to the people for me. I spent a lot of time meeting with the board and the ownership and understanding what their vision is. Everything was new in the last few years, so that made it appealing to kind of understand who got involved, why they get involved, and what do they want to do. And so that opportunity came, and I think it was a good fit for all of us.
So what surprised you most when you first started the job?
Nothing surprised me, I don't think, other than, I guess as time went on, I realized so much of any women's sport is really convincing people that it's, professional, it's elite. These players are highly skilled. Obviously when you come to a game, if you come to a national team game, you come to a pro game at the PHF, you see that, but there's many that haven't seen it yet. So you spend a lot of time convincing people they should spend money on it, convincing people to support it in all sorts of ways, and have media support it, all those things. And I think the thing that felt different, and also an indicator of where women's sports is going, and where particularly women's hockey is coming to the PHF, the board of governors are there committing a ton of resources because they care about it, and most have a connection to hockey or played hockey, and really care about what happens here. So to eliminate that part of the job for the most part, and to just know that you're supported by anybody you talk to within the league is really fun.
That's awesome. Okay, so I eventually want to get into discussing the opportunity for young female hockey players to make their dream of playing professional hockey, as a viable career option. But in order to get there, I'd like to understand a little more about the business and hockey side of the PHF. So starting with some basics of the business side and how they translate then into the hockey operation. So top line revenue is the oxygen, for any sports league. So without getting into specific numbers, how do the league's revenues break down by source? Specifically, like I know in the NHL, gate revenue, also known as like ticket sales, is the biggest individual line item, followed by like media rights and sponsorships. So which revenue sources are most important to the PHF?
Yeah, well, they're all important, and I think certainly gate and some of the the ticket sales category, that's something that we have to grow into, making sure that is meaningful in the future. We're obviously still emerging and growing, and we have smaller venues, but sponsorship is an essential part of our business approach, and we have terrific sponsors. And what's special about it is we're bringing sponsors on that want to be part of this journey, that really understand what they're committing to, and they can see immediately the impact they have. So it feels a little bit more unique and special, and kind of a teammate truly in a lot of senses, versus maybe when being in NBA and NHL, where there's, it's still meaningful, and there's a lot of partnerships that are valuable in the sense they're really engaged, but, there's a bit of a disconnect, and they might not even get to meet the players at some point, but we just are in that stage where everybody's teaming up and working together. So sponsorships are a huge part of that. Obviously continuing to have investors join us. I say it a lot this year at the beginning, even when I started same time last year. you're still making a few calls to people to see, you know, who's interested, explain what we're doing over the course of a season. The amount of calls that are now coming, and we're taking these calls, and we're not going out and seeking these meetings, has increased significantly. So we just know we're on the right path, and we know people are excited about women's professional hockey and what the PHF is doing.
Yeah, inbound sales is much better than outbound sales. Higher convert rate. All right. So how important was having all the PHF games on ESPN Plus, and also many shown on TSN and TVA in Canada, this past season?
Yeah, well, there's always been some hurdles for women's professional ice hockey, but I think what's pretty powerful about this league is it's always been a trailblazer and answering the call. While it wasn't the amount of money people wanted at the beginning, this is the first league to say, yes, we are going to pay players. And, the first to provide medical benefits, the first to do a number of things, and having a full season broadcast, especially with a partner like ESPN, is another first for women's professional ice hockey, and makes a difference. We see those big moments at the Olympics and all the viewership and those numbers every 4 years, and maybe it's rising a bit with World Championships, but there's a ton of great hockey that's going on, and with the PHF, we're able to kind of continue to fill in and showcase the best of women's hockey in between those moments. So it's really important for us. Obviously, sponsors value those opportunities on our broadcast and media platforms, and we're looking forward to growing that on linear and on live stream.
Gotcha. And you may have kind of touched upon it earlier with my previous question, but how do you feel, what do you think the key sources of growth will be for the next 3 to 5 years from a revenue perspective?
Yeah, I think it'll be similar to now. I mean, continuing to have investors will, expansion is always important, in making sure we're in these key markets. But the sponsorship and investor side of it, while we grow our, media rights and media plans, is going to be impactful for us. But we are in that growth mode, and we're in that build mode. So we expect every few years to be really taking a look at what's next. We're not in that 10-year planning, because we expect to be here for a long time, and we want to see women's professional ice hockey continue to excel and grow and be sustainable. But we have to evaluate our venues every few years, because we intend to keep growing in a way that we outgrow whatever we're doing every few years. So a lot of evaluation, a lot of strategy meetings constantly going on.
Gotcha. And you hinted at it in your answer there. I know everybody asks you, when you're going to add a new team and where's it going to be. So my question is slightly different, which is, what's your criteria for when and where to add a team? Because I watched the WNBA play an exhibition game in Toronto this past weekend, and their commissioner discussed a pretty robust process on how they hope to plan, a couple of teams by 2025. What's your kind of methodology for thinking that through?
Yeah, and similar to what I mentioned about investors and sponsors, the incoming calls are on that category are also increasing significantly. So Beautiful. It challenges us to make sure we continue to upgrade that process and make sure we have, a thorough due diligence on who do we want, where do we want to be. So those assessments are still happening. But I think it always starts with people. I mean, that's, going back to my interest in joining the PHF, because the people that were backing it and the players that had, continued to move the needle by showing up and putting on a great show for our fans. And so I think it'll largely be about people that have that same vision and share that vision. So, as you noted, we were in Arizona for our Isabel Cup and Championship. So certainly, regionally, we're interested in expanding and looking and having a fresh perspective on all of that and what it means to grow the sport rapidly. So, I wouldn't say geography is necessarily the overarching theme, although it'd be smart to make sure it's reasonable. But as noted in my experience moving around, and it certainly being in non-traditional markets, I'm always interested to shake it up a little bit.
Yes, and here on the West Coast, specifically Anaheim and Seattle, have both proven that they can sell out arenas for women's hockey. So I'll just put a little plug for that. As you kind of mentioned, I watched the awesome Isabel Cup overtime. at Mullet Arena, and was impressed with the level of hockey, even during the other games that I saw throughout the season. However, high quality talent in games are necessary, but not sufficient to grow your fan base. So you also need like storylines and personalities, in-game and off-ice programming, beta coverage, et cetera, et cetera. So what types of kind of growth strategies are you doing for that kind of stuff? I know the previous commissioner, she came from minor league baseball and had a whole bunch of ideas about, how they've done there. I'm curious, what your ideas are and which other leagues that you benchmark besides the WNBA to kind of find ideas and best practices.
Yeah, well, great question. And storytelling is a big part of our, I'm actually in the middle of these few days of strategy sessions, and a large part of that is dedicated to, which platforms and how we're going to approach storytelling. We've had a lot of opportunities to explore docuseries and different avenues like that. So I think the more, like anything, the more you learn about these players and the more you learn about their commitment and their stories off the ice, as much as their performance on the ice, it's a win for everybody, and certainly a win for the PHF. So that's an important next step for us. And we're going to spend a lot of time preparing to augment that here in the off season. But I take ideas and thoughts from everywhere. I think that's, what I enjoy is knowing we have a platform, we have a place to demonstrate the best practices of a lot of different, not just sports. And I wouldn't limit it to women's sports. You mentioned WNBA, they do a great job, but we're also in a different era of when we're starting, and how we should approach this league might be different than, what that looks like. Taking ideas from, whether it's soccer in Europe or, different sports here, but different businesses and startups, and really trying to be creative and fresh with our ideas. So we spent a lot of time talking to people outside of the sport as well as inside it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I don't know if you've checked out the Savannah Bananas, but like if you want entertainment, that baseball team is just pure entertainment. So,
I have. You're speaking my language. I love that stuff.
Yeah, and you have Madison Packer, who's one of your stars for the Riveters. Just her and her family alone could be a little docuseries right there. So
yeah, and she's a great example. I mean, just there's so much that these players have done, not just as hockey players, but just as terrific human beings, but also to drive the sport forward and to sacrifice a lot for that. So those stories need to be told, along with we talk a lot at PHF about honoring the past pioneers, and you'll see that throughout our games and our broadcasts, and just even highlighting throughout the season. We want to be a community. We want to be a beacon that reflects those that got us here, as well as inspire the future. So there's so many stories to tell, not just the ones that are currently out there competing, but the ones that got us here.
Beautiful. So I do have a couple of hockey operation questions for you. So as someone who knows the pain of losing a single elimination game championship that you worked a long time to get to, I'm referring to, of course, the 2014 gold medal. Why do you only play one game in the finals for the PHF? So I understand why it's like that in college and international hockey, although I think the Olympics should be 7 games. But it seems like pro hockey should have extended playoff rounds, and it would be great to generate buzz and interest, especially if you have overtimes. Like I wish the overtime that you had, was like 5-on-5 and went for 3 periods before Teresa Venesanova scored the goal. Like, I mean, it was incredibly entertaining, but I wanted to keep going. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be part of our culture is to be as transparent as possible. So I'll do that for you here and explain how we got there. But first, given the audience, you said that is primarily engaged with your podcast, I will make one comment about the 2014 Olympics and that experience, as painful and gut-wrenching as that was, and at times can still be. Those are those experiences, those opportunities to learn the lessons and to make sure. I think if you look at our success rate following Sochi Olympics and IHF tournaments, we're really proud of the undefeated record for those years leading up to what eventually was the gold medal. So that didn't just happen because things fell into place. It happened because we took a real hard look and embraced the failures to help us get to that next level. So to answer your question, totally agree with you. I think we went back to expanding the playoff lead up, the shortening the number of decreasing the number of teams so that we can enhance that playoff format, and then having the best out of 3 leading up to the finals. So we are on that path, and we actually did have a a best out of 3 series for the finals in our planning and our scheduling, which had to get changed when they changed the World Championships and some of that scheduling. We had to make some adjustments. So it was not in our plan to make that a 1 game, but at the same time, we also had to weigh we had the opportunity to be on linear, and we're still an emerging league. We still have to prove ourselves. So it'd be great if we had 3 linear games and we could, best out of 3 and have that commitment, which we, hope to moving forward. But as we consider this the new era, the proving season. So in that setting, ESPN had an opportunity to put us on 1 linear game. So you've got to make those calls of what's the benefit of sponsorship and the business and the eyeballs and all that. So so all those things are well vetted and evaluated, and that's where it was terrific. The broadcast looked great. I think the game was terrific. The semifinals leading up to it were great games in series. So hopefully we'll just expand and do more of it.
Gotcha. And so most important question, do you think Gary Bettman was jealous that you didn't get booed when you presented the Isabel Cup?
I'm sure if we give it a season, I can achieve that as well. But no, I think, a sign of people paying attention. So that's always a good thing.
Okay, last question. So on the operations side, where's the league on allowing checking? I know the Swedish Women's League tested it out this past season. Not sure if you got any insights from that experience. Has that been in any consideration? And then we'll move on to the making money side of things for players.
Yeah, that's not in our game plan, and we don't spend a lot of time talking about it, mainly because I think if you watch any of the elite hockey games, the physicality is significant. It's there, and I think the way the game is played at the moment is the best of everything. It's a great passing game. It's a fast moving game. It keeps momentum going, but the physicality is certainly there. I can recall a lot of moments that I think it's right on the edge of what it should be. And to add checking just because it's done on the men's side or the men's pro game, or maybe, in pockets of women's game, it doesn't mean it's something we have to get to be, legitimized in any way. I think we have probably the right recipe for exactly what hockey should look like.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's move on. We talked about the revenue side of things and the growth side of things. Now let's talk a little bit about the cost. So, incredibly, for the salary cap for the 2023-24 season is going to be $1.5 million per team, which is awesome. So, how are you able to grow the salary cap so much in such a short period of time?
Well, like I said, it's a proving season. The owners came in, and a little bit of difficult start with it still being part of COVID and not having a true sense of a season, and then having that, and then this last season being kind of that next step towards it. My first season as well. So I think that was there's a huge commitment on their part, but a little bit of balance. Let's see how quickly we can grow. Let's make some assessments. Let's get our roll up our sleeves, get to work, and see what we learned in the last really 24 months. So in that process, I think the confidence and the commitment and understanding, as I mentioned, all the positive incoming calls on a lot of fronts, and I think that our ability to everybody wanted to get there is just a matter of how quickly we can get there and what makes sense. And the owners definitely put their faith and confidence in the league moving forward, and made that step sooner than most would have anticipated.
Yeah, it's awesome because what happens is that you solve the chicken and the egg problem of having money needed to pay the highest talented players. So now that you have the money, you're getting the highest talented players like Darryl Watson and Lena Mueller going straight from college into the pro ranks, making really good money. I saw this morning there are 4 players on the Connecticut Whale who will make more than $100,000 next season. You already have stars like Lauren Gable and Elizabeth Jaguar. So what I saw is also that, the PHF plays roughly a 24-game regular season, at least this past season, from October till the end of March. And so, a player making about $80,000 would be like making $275,000 if they played an 82-game season like the NHL. So that's really good. So will the NHL be, will the PHF be playing more games overall next season and adding, midweek games, since players, will probably be focused full-time on hockey with those kind of salaries?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right in that, the salaries do affect a lot, more than just compensating players and recognizing their skill and talent as professional athletes, but it also is about allowing us to have practices at certain times, to have games during the week, because, until you can, pay everybody a livable wage and that can't just be the top end players, it has to be everybody in the league, then you're somewhat limited to what you can do. So for us to upgrade that salary cap, a lot of those decisions were part of that. So yeah, weekday games. It still won't be, the primary time for our games. We'll still focus on the weekends, but we had a lot of games that overlap this season. We'll start to stagger that a bit so fans can kind of watch that more naturally, and have different games outside of our current markets, as we did a little bit this season. We'll do a little bit more of those neutral sites to help grow the game and grow the sport. But yeah, everything's tied together, and it all matters in order for us to drive this forward even faster. So we're excited about the salary cap. Obviously the players are, but it really just allows us to take that leap faster.
Yeah, and the one thing I didn't mention is, the average salary coming out of college these days just is roughly in the, mid 50s or so. If you want to get an accounting degree, it's in the mid 60s. I mean, so these are like comparable, if not, depending how good a player are, even above average what you'd be getting out of college, and yet you're playing hockey, and so which is pretty darn good. So it really does make it a real viable option for a lot of these players. But
Absolutely.
Related to that is, this is a good problem to have, but what's the PHF perspective on players working another job by choice? Is that something you encourage, or are you going to start frowning upon?
Listen, I think, we're always going to listen to the players. It's a big part of what we do, and having a lot of dialogue consistently and getting feedback on where we are. And we're just in that, again, growth stage. So we have to really balance it. If once everybody can do something, that's when we can take a leap to say, this is our expectation. But in the meantime, I think most players, to answer that question, want to play hockey full time. So I don't think there's many that are trying to do the dual career. Although there are some out there that make sense. But, we want to focus on being the best home for women's professional ice hockey, and being a place where these athletes, deservingly so, can, make a career of being a professional athlete. So that's our focus. And, if there's some side hustles out there, I don't think we're going to frown upon it.
Okay, cool. So now let's shift to kind of more the audience for this podcast, youth girls playing hockey. So just 4 or 5 years ago, when I would talk to people about my daughter potentially playing college hockey, they always make somewhat negative comments about how she better get into a good school because she'll never make money playing hockey. So how's that changed just in the last couple of years?
Yeah, we want kids to go to bad schools and good schools, I think it's just like, it's going to be more competitive and similar to D1. It's really difficult to get into these opportunities. I mean, you have to be elite of the elite, and the same will be for women's professional games. So, we're here to serve a purpose of sports entertainment, but also development, and, being a opportunity for those national team players and Olympians to continue to play. A lot of them, even 5 years ago, have to probably end their careers earlier than they'd want to, just because there wasn't, a really balanced opportunity out of college. So, we have a really specific focus, mainly because most people in the PHF have been through it and really understand it and what it means to have this opportunity. But we want to be part of that decision process for those players that have the skill set to do it.
Awesome. And so what advice do you have for those girls who are playing youth hockey today, some, maybe 14, 15 years old, and dream of playing pro hockey here in North America?
Well, you can do it, and have fun figuring out your path to, if that's your dream, then there's nothing stopping you. Certainly the opportunity is there. And I think what's really cool about just seeing the different aspects of the game, whether it's national team, college, and professional now, and even when I was with the NHL, the friendships and the teammates, that aspect and that bonding and the camaraderie that comes in those high school and particularly college years is something, you're gaining friends and teammates for life, and they're rooting for you. And I think that's really the ultimate goal, is finding places where, you have a good support system, or you have coaches that believe in you, you have people that are really championing you as a person on and off the ice, and that'll make all the difference in your path, and most likely lead you to pro sports if that's where you want to go a lot faster. But yeah, if this is what you want to do and this is what you love to do, now you can look to these mentors and ask them questions, see how they do it, see what their training's like, see what their discipline is like, and how they eat and how they sleep and how they recover from these moments. All those things matter, and it's going to be great to be a platform to be able to share more of that for those that are interested in pursuing it.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Last question. What would a teenage Reagan Carey think about you being coming on this podcast and talking about all the stuff that you've done for women's hockey since you were a teenager?
Yeah, I think it would be surprising in a lot of ways, but also it does make sense in a lot of ways. So I think I was not the best player. I was surrounded by a ton of great players. I was always in that mix, but I just kept showing up. Like I said before, I showed up. I loved the sport. I love finding a way to contribute. And I think that largely reflects my career. I care a lot about the sport. I care about the people that are in it, and just want to keep doing what I can to contribute, because it's given me so much in my life. So the opportunity to see what I'm doing now, I mean, I think I'd be confused about podcasts, obviously. I think I was a flip phone kind of generation. So, and that was even new and cool then. But I just appreciate what you're doing to make sure you kind of share the lessons. And USA Hockey, we did a lot of building those player development guides, because we know how hard it is to understand those pathways to move forward and advance. So the more we can share and talk about it, the better for everybody.
Beautiful. Well, Commissioner, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your perspective and your entire career history, and then obviously letting folks know what's possible with the PHF if they're elite of the elite. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for the support, and thanks for showcasing us. We appreciate it.
I really want to thank the Commissioner for coming on the podcast. There was so much I learned and enjoyed from her stories, specifically how she charted a unique path on the business side of sports, her plans for the future of the PHF, and her perspective on the opportunities for girls to pursue a professional career in hockey. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Before you go, I wanted to share more about the app in Champs app. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know I spend a lot of time talking with coaches, parents, and players about the hockey recruiting process. One of the key questions that people want to know is, how does a player get noticed by college coaches? While there are many ways to be discovered, the easiest way to get on a college's radar is to send a coach an email and provide them all the information they need to assess if you are a player worth keeping their eyes on. That's where the app part of Champs app comes in. Champs app was designed based on all the conversations and feedback we received about the recruiting process, and we've built a tool to help players and coaches connect with a ton of the information they want to know. It all starts with creating a free, beautiful Champs app profile. After that, there's some pretty magical things that can happen to help make the recruiting process a little less overwhelming. Your Champs app profile includes all the basic academic, personal, and athletic information coaches want to know. Then, by including video, schedule information, and your coach's contact details, colleges can easily start their evaluation process. You just copy and paste your personalized link and send it to coaches so they can see your public player profile without even having to log in or create a Champs app account. Or you can connect directly with coaches on Champs app. More and more coaches are creating their own Champs app profiles and connecting with players themselves every day. Now coaches can have all the information they need to assess where you might fit in their recruiting plans. Even better, college coaches can track your progress throughout the winter and showcase seasons, because as you make changes to your profile, coaches will get notified to your updates. And in the future, we will be adding even more amazing features to improve your visibility to the recruiting process and hopefully increase your odds of success. If you want to see what a player or coach profile looks like before you start your own, look in the show notes to see some examples. My kids and I have used Champs app for their recruiting process. In fact, my son was invited to a AAA tryout thanks to his Champs app profile. So go to www.champs.app and start your player or coach profile. It only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete most of your key information. Good luck, and please let us know how it helped with your recruiting journey.